The Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, CA. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights will be indicated as UDHR. The International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights will be indicated as ICSECR. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights will be indicated as ICCPR. In the CA, Article 26, the guarantee in this Charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada. It is clear that there are rights and freedoms in Canada that are in operation apart from the Constitution Act. Canada, the state, is under obligation to recognize these rights and freedoms. Because of the fact that Canada did sign on to the international covenants and sign on to the Universal Declaration, that they have no choice but to recognize the rights and freedoms that are enumerated in these covenants. Therefore, you here in Canada have the right to call on these covenants to express your rights and freedoms for the human being. The ICSECR and the ICCPR. These are contractual agreements that Canada are under obligation to follow. They cannot shake them, they cannot walk away from them. They are under obligation and they are liable to what is written in these contracts. Article 5 states in both of these covenants that nothing in the present covenant may be interpreted as implying for any state, that includes Canada or your province, group, or person, any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights or freedoms recognized herein, or at the limitation to a greater extent than is provided for in the present covenant itself. When these covenants were enacted, they even went so far as to make sure that the human rights and freedoms will be for sure protected and guaranteed. Now listen to the construct of this sentence. No restriction upon or derogation from any of the fundamental human rights recognized or existing in any country in virtue of law, conventions, regulations, or custom shall be admitted on the pretext that the present covenant does not recognize such rights, or that it recognizes them to a lesser extent. Again, we see the contractual obligation, the liability that is resting upon these states' parties. Because in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 30, it states, nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights or freedoms set forth herein. So this article produces a guarantee for you. Your human rights and freedoms that are available for you are set forth in these charters and are set forth in these covenants. And no one, no state party, no person, or no group has any right to remove these rights and freedoms from you. In the CA, the Canadian Constitution Act, Article 2, it states that everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. Freedom of association. You can choose who you want to be associated with as a human being. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21, states the same thing. It says everyone has the right to partake in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. So you see, they've given you the right to express your fundamental freedom. You can choose to associate or you can choose not to associate. Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms states that everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. Again, here in this article of law, there is a choice that is being presented with you. You can own property alone or you can own it in association. such as an association with your municipality. That's exactly how they have you holding property right now, in association with the municipality as a legal person. Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. So you see the expression coming out again. You have the choice to associate with whom you want, and if you choose not to associate with whatever group or person it is, or state party it is that you do not want to associate with, no one can hold you in servitude. No one can force you to associate with them. If they would say that, no, you have an obligation to associate with us because I say so, that is servitude, and no one has the right to do that. Now, in the ICCPR, Article 8, it states the same thing. It says that no one, meaning also no human being, shall be held in servitude. So, we see it again clearly in the ICCPR in Article 22. It states that everyone shall have the right to freedom of association with others. So you have the right to choose, you have the right to decide whom it is you will associate with, whether that being a country, or whether that being a group, or a party. That is your choice. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 20, says, no one may be compelled to belong to an association. So, if Canada tries to force you to be compelled to belong to them, to be compelled to serve Her Majesty as a class of persons, then they are breaking this article that they are under contractual agreement to follow. And you can produce a remedy for yourself. Now, to be part of a system, to associate with a system, is your choice as a human being. And no one can compel you or force you to be part or serve them. Canada is a system that is created around a fiction called Her Majesty. You are not, and I say that, you are not under obligation to associate with her or her servants. In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 6, it says everyone has the right to recognition as a person everywhere before the law. Now you have the right to take recognition, to enter into recognition as a juridical personality or a legal person, thereby taking on Canadian citizenship, that title, upon you. But you have no obligation. No one can force you. In the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, Article 16, it says everyone shall have the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. So again, you see it clearly coming out within the laws and the covenants, that everyone, the human being, has the right to enter into recognition. You shall have that right, but you have no obligation. None. Now, you have the right that you can exercise. This right is to take recognition as a juridical personality, just as I mentioned. However, you have no obligation to exercise this right. And the fact that it is mentioned in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms and in the International Covenant, it gives you two witnesses to law. So if you ever have to bring these covenants into court to prove that they are under contractual agreement to let you go and let you operate as a human being, you have two witnesses. And before the law, that is very powerful. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, it says everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. So when you decide to exercise your rights as a human being, and when you decide that you will no longer be considered a subject of Her Majesty, conferred with rights and privileges that you pay for, no one has the right to, if you will say, come against you and to bother you. And if you begin to show other people their rights and freedoms, then no one has the right to disturb you for what you're doing. And if someone does, from the government, you have the power and you have the laws to protect yourself. In the ICCPR, Article 19, it says everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. So you see it again in operation. Just like in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms, you have this operation of freedom for the human being in the International Covenant, which once again I will state that Canada is a signatory to and are under obligation to follow. Now, the rest of that verse states that everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art or through any other media of his choice. So you can clearly express yourself, and you can clearly talk to the government and talk to Her Majesty's servants in order to exercise your fundamental rights and freedoms as a human being. Now, in the Canadian Constitution Act, Article 7, we see an article of law that's written like this: everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Well, the principles of fundamental justice that they use is they strip you from the designation, from the title of human being. They give to you the title of juridical personality, legal person, and that legal person is a subject, a servant who owes its allegiance to Her Majesty. And that subject who owes his or her allegiance to Her Majesty can only have rights and privileges that are paid for. They are not free. Now, in the International Covenant of Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, Article 1.2, it says all peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources, without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. So here, in the International Covenant, you have the right to the security of your person. All peoples here is referring to that legal person. It is referring to the Canadian citizen, to the juridical personality. And here it says that all peoples may freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources. Here in Canada, our natural wealth and our resources that are a part of the land of Canada has been seized by the servants of Her Majesty, and there are fiduciary agents, constructive registered holders who are operating over our natural wealth and resources. They are taking our monetary value, our monetary money, and they are depositing it into social systems. And they are saying these social systems fulfill the fundamental rights of a human being. But these social systems are not applicable to a human being. They're only applicable to persons, and they do not fulfill the human being's rights and freedoms. Far be it from it. Now the ICSECR says that recognizing that in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so there again you see that these covenants and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they work together. The ideal of free human beings enjoying freedom from fear and want can only, so they leave out, there's no other option, can only be achieved if conditions are created, whereby everyone may enjoy, not pursue after, but enjoy his economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as his civil and political rights. So once again, you clearly see an operation of law that says that everyone has the right to enjoy his economic and social and cultural rights, and that freedom from fear and want can only be achieved if conditions were created. And these conditions indeed have been created. And how have they been created? Is through the fact that there is a security for all of us. And that security represents the fact that we are all entitled as God creatures to food, water, clothing, and all the things that would keep us alive and healthy while we are here on this planet. The Queen, Her Majesty, decided to seize all the natural elements here in Canada and put a commercial value upon it, put a monetary value upon it. And she erected a system that attached a monetary value to natural things in natural order. For example, an apple, an orange, or meat, whatever it may be, the Queen has decided that you have to pay banknotes in order for you to obtain these gifts that God had given you prior to her interference. Now, they created a security of the person that you would have access to all these natural things that you need without having to work for them, so that you may enjoy your rights and freedoms and not pursue after your rights and freedoms. Now, it says that in the ICCPR, where not already provided for by existing legislative or other measures, each state party to the present covenant undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its, now listen to what it says here, constitutional process, and with the provisions of the present covenant to adopt such laws or other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognized in the present covenant. So when you, as a man or a woman, understand that as a human being you are free, and as a human being you have a right to associate with whom you want, you have a right to become or be considered a juridical personality and no obligation, you have a right to partake of the government and no obligation, you have a right to work and no obligation, you have a right to pursue food and pursue your needs, or you have a right to enjoy after your food and needs. Well, all of these rights and freedoms, the government is under obligation to take necessary measures, to enact legislation, to adopt laws that will let you express these rights and freedoms. And they have. The only difference is that they've hidden all of this. The ICCPR Article 47. Nothing in the present covenant shall be interpreted as impairing the inherent right of all peoples to enjoy and utilize fully and freely their natural wealth and resources. So you see it again in Article 47. It says that even in this covenant, the fact that we have provided a way for men and women to be stripped of their natural right and of their natural freedoms, it says that the people have the right to enjoy and utilize fully and freely their natural wealth and resources. So just as you are in law, just where you are right now, if you understand that even as a juridical personality, even as a subject of Her Majesty, there is still an operation of law available for you out there that allows you to freely enjoy and utilize your natural wealth and resources that she seized from you. The only problem is, again, that there is a fiduciary over our accounts who is controlling all of this in all of these Commonwealth countries. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living, and here's your security in action, adequate for health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services. These are your rights as a human being. These are your rights that are there, and they are guaranteed to you. There is a contractual obligation for Canada to provide these rights for you. Now, it is qualified in more, or qualified in a better way, in the International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights, Article 11. It states that the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. So you have the right to the continuous improvement of living conditions apart from all that was just mentioned. The state parties will take appropriate steps to ensure the realization of this right. Now listen to that again. The state parties will take. This produces obligation and liability. They will take appropriate steps to ensure the realization of this right. Well, the state parties here in Canada, they did just the opposite. Instead of securing and ensuring the realization of these rights, they stripped us of these rights by rendering us and designating us legal persons, juridical personalities who are subjects of Her Majesty. Now, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26, it states that everyone has the right to education, and education shall be free. Now, it says at least in the elementary and fundamental stages, elementary education shall be compulsory, technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Now again, that's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms. Now when they went and they qualified it even more, in the ICCPR, or the ICSECR, Article 13, It states this: the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to education. They agree that education shall be directed. Listen to that. That's what education is for. Education is not to teach you how to become a lawyer. It's not to teach you how to make $1 million. It's not to teach you how to be the best at your job and get a managerial position. That's not what education was primarily for. It says that education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity, and shall strengthen the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. This is what the purpose of education is for a human being, for a man and woman. This is what we should have been taught in school. Now, they qualify education on the other side, the education for the juridical personality, who's part of the society. They further agree that education shall enable all persons, look at that, all persons to participate effectively. The states, parties to the present covenant, recognize with a view to achieving the full realization of this right, primary education shall be compulsory and available free to all. Secondary education in its different forms, including technical and vocational secondary education, shall be made generally available and accessible to all by every appropriate means, and in particular by the progressive introduction of free education. Free education. Now, higher education shall be made equally accessible to all on the basis of capacity by every appropriate means, and in particular by the progressive introduction of free education.